He's arguably the most famous artist in the world.
My name is Ai Weiwei. I'm an artist.
Probably the most important, he takes on the issues of our times.
I think we can do a lot if we open our heart, if we understand philosophically what refugee is about.
He's China's best-known dissident.
You're not allowed to talk. I'm on probation.
Harassed by police who bulldozed his Shanghai studio, he was thrown in jail without charge and driven out of his country.
I just have a book come out, 1,000 Years of Joys and Sorrows.
A memoir about his father's life, his own life, and 100 years of Chinese history.
You're here in France because your memoir has been translated into French. You decided to write it while you were detained by the Chinese authorities in 2011 for your son. Tell us why.
Well, when I was told I could be put away for over 10 years, I have this urgent to say, what about my son? When it comes out, he will never recognize me. He never knows what really happened to me and his grandfather. So I said, if I come out, I have to write as a record.
Recreated in this art installation, Ai Weiwei was disappeared for 81 days in a Chinese jail in 2011. 2 guards looking over him day and night.
During that time, the whole world protested for your freedom, but you didn't know that. How did you cope?
Nothing you can do, There's no lawyer. You cannot call your family to see where you are. I just think I'm in their hands and they can do whatever to me, so.
Why do you think the Chinese authorities are so afraid of you and so afraid of art?
That's a good question. In China, there's no single voice. It's completely silent. So when a voice comes out, that definitely is a voice against their rules. They are afraid of voice like me can subversive their ruling, because I'm not afraid, and also there's a lot of listeners there.
A lot of the book focuses on your father, the internationally renowned poet Ai Qing. The year you were born, he was banished to Little Siberia. You grew up in exile, living in a dugout. Your father underwent reform through labour. At times he had to wear a dunce's hat. He had to clean the public toilets. He wasn't allowed to read or write. He had to burn his books. What effect did seeing all of that happen to your dad have on you?
He spent about 20 years in exile. That is our life. Nobody believed the communist eventually would let us become a normal human being again. So from that kind of experience, I understand about humanity, about how wrong and how badly whole society can go. It can be total darkness.
Today your life is totally different. You're an internationally recognized artist and you live in a certain comfort. How do you reconcile these two very different parts of your life?
My early time, yes, it's harsh if you look back. It's inhuman, but it teach me so many things. And today, I get some recognition, but still I'm very cautious about it. What is really about? What is the meaning of to be recognized, and what is the responsibility for me to continuously defend human rights and freedom of speech?
The title of your book is taken from a poem written by your father. It evokes the ruins of an ancient city. No, the sumptuous palace is already only ruin, 1,000 years of joys and sorrows, of which there is no trace left. Men who live, enjoy life, do not expect the earth to keep the memory. Why is this so special for you?
I think the poems tell some kind of ultimate truth. Our human struggle is temporary. Even we did so much damage to each other or to the planet Earth, but still the human can be vanished and there's no traces can even left. So I think that's an important lesson. Our precious life is not permanent. So we better find a way to use it in the meaningful way.
When China opened up in the 80s, you went to go and live in New York, where you stayed for 12 years. How did your experience there change the way you see the world?
I was excited, but also disillusioned about the West, about the extreme capitalism, about this kind of crazy lifestyle. I was supposed to find a new destination after I left China, but I don't feel I belong to that kind of society. So I become alone again.
Did you feel freer?
Well, freedom is a word being often used. Yes, you're free, no police chasing you, or you can see whatever, nobody care. But nobody care is the problem. People are completely isolated and nobody care.
You were in New York in 1989 when the protests in Tiananmen Square took place. In your book you write, young people in China have no knowledge of all the student protests of 1989 in Tiananmen Square, and if they knew, they might not even care, for they learn submission before they have learned the ability to raise doubt and challenge assumptions. How have the Chinese succeeded in erasing that memory?
I think the government of China are the most successful government in change the history or hiding the facts or erase all the evidence. And they have been doing that for decades.
With films about the plight of refugees and the pandemic, Ai Weiwei's life's work has become a quest for truth and freedom. In 2008, he made it his mission to identify the names of more than 5,000 children who died in the Sichuan earthquake.
You said it was that moment that you went from being an artist to a social activist. How do you reflect on the moment those two became one?
Education always tells you you become an artist because you acquire certain skill, drawing, painting, sculpting, but that is become so limited and very self-serving. And only when I realize my voice can serve the public, then I realize my skill can be much stronger and to fight defending the justice.
For example, you've been calling for the freedom of Julian Assange for a long time. You visited him in prison. You've protested against his extradition to the United States, and you've got a social media campaign called Run for Our Rights, which is aimed at defending press freedom. I wonder, do you see parallels between the actions of whistleblowers like Julian Assange, Edward Snowden and Chelsea Manning against their governments and your experience of standing up to the Chinese authorities?
There's parallel, but they're also different. When I raised up my voice against the Chinese authority, I've been pictured by the West as some kind of hero. But once the things happened to Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, or Chelsea Manning, they have been pictured as criminals. And what they did is trying to even sacrifice their life to provide crucial information about the crimes did by Western government. So what they're doing basically is to provide the information. It's no different from any journalist. But even mainstream media in the West, many of them avoid to support this very crucial value of journalism.
Your father was sent to a labour camp in Xinjiang. It's the same site where today the Uyghur people are sent to labour camps. Some Western countries have called this a genocide. What's the West's responsibility, do you think, with respect to human rights in China?
The West have to see human rights as the only value which any state, any religion, any ideology has to protect, and also defending it without any kind of excuse. Western have double standard, selected situations which can benefit them to bargain or to get more some kind of excuse. But many other wrongdoings, not just by the other government, even by themselves, has been totally ignored. China is not going to take this kind of accusation. It just doesn't work that way.
And because of the human rights concerns, some countries are staging a diplomatic boycott at the Olympics, which means that they haven't sent government officials. Will that make any difference? Do you think that the athletes should boycott, or do you think the West should have actually done more to stop the games taking place altogether?
For a few days in our calendar will be discuss matters like that. But we all know that China has been raised with totally support of the West only because they can explore through the globalization a profit from China, because they love to work with authoritarians. They love to work someplace no workers' protection, no human rights. This is a dreamful condition for the West. They never want China to become democracy, become one of them. Then, they lost the possibilities. So I think this whole thing is hypocritic. The boycott is like a joke. You don't boycott a sport game. There's so many things you can defend. All your corporations are rooted in China, still make huge profit. But why they don't do the boycott? You have to boycott a sport game. It's ridiculous. And China only would see that as weak sign of the West. You lost ability even to defend your values.
There are also stringent COVID policies at the Games. China has a zero COVID policy. You've made a documentary about COVID. You also made one about SARS back in 2003. What do you make of China's COVID policy?
The policy is ridiculous. It's not scientific. It doesn't belong to rationality, but with a bureaucratic military type of psychology to intimidating the whole society, and which they do all the time. But this become more extreme because they control all the information of every individual and monitoring it, and also surveillance. So you purely just become not human, but some kind of controllable species.
You've said in the past that we will all pay the price for China becoming more powerful. What do you mean?
China knows the West cannot just cut off the connections with China. It's impossible. German clearly said Germany's industrial future really depends on China. And, if you see French or England, you see those government officials, when they go to China, how much they just like to leak the boots of the emperor to get more business, sell more jets or whatever. But China knows the game so much better. Money talks. China is rich. China is powerful. China can make quick decisions.
Ai Weiwei, today you live in exile in Portugal. You left when you got your passport back in 2015. You weren't banished. Will you ever go back?
I always want to go back. I can go back tomorrow if I want to, but I cannot be sure I can come out again. You may never heard me again.
Like a star in the sky or a tree in a field, he was always there as a compass point. That's what you wrote about your father. What would your father have made of your success had he lived to see it?
I don't think my father really cares about that. He may not even like my artworks, but doesn't matter. We're in two different generations, facing very different problems.
The book is for your son. Do you see more joys or more sorrows for him in the future?
My son will be 13 in a few days. He is full of energy, positive opinions about his environment, which I feel happy about it. But still, I would worry. He also will face a very different world from me or from his grandfather.
Ai Weiwei, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Join us here on France 24 for our special coverage of the mother of all elections here in France, the presidential election 2022. The campaign will have our special envoys on the campaign trail. Across the globe, we'll have the latest polling, the best analysis, every week here on France 24.
France 2022, the campaign on France 24 and France24.com.